Hi everyone, my name is Neve and you're very welcome to our fourth MakeCode for Microbit webinar. Joining me today is Kaylin.
Hi everyone.
And we also have Amanda, Richard and Corey working in the background to answer any questions you may have. So, if you feel stuck at any stage, please feel free to pop a question into the Q&A section, or if you want to let us know how you got on in the home challenge, because we've received some brilliant home challenges to date. So I want to really say well done to everyone who's let us know how they're getting on with their home challenges. It looks like you're getting on fantastic. Okay. And something else I want to reiterate is that you can pop this webinar and pause at any stage. So if you feel like you need a little bit more time to find some blocks, just pop the webinar on pause and then you can unpause it whenever you feel like it. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick recap on what we covered last week. So I'm going to go to MakeCode.microbit.org. Okay, and this will open up the home page. So this is what we go to every single week. And we're going to create a new project because we're going to be covering something new. I'm just going to go quickly over what we covered last week. So I am going to call this webinar 4. Perfect. Great. Okay, so thinking back to last week we created a virtual game, which most of you were familiar with, rock, paper, scissors. So we didn't need the on start and we didn't need the forever block. Instead, the first thing we needed to do was we needed to come up with a way of mimicking the handshake. So when you play rock, paper, scissors, the first thing you do is you shake your hand. Okay, so to mimic our handshake, we used the on-shake input. Okay, so we use the on-shake input. And the next thing we needed to do was we needed to come up with a way of giving the microbit the different options. We needed to come up with a way of giving the microbit rock, paper, and scissors. So we needed 3 options. So in order to do that, we needed to create a variable. Okay, so we went down to variable section. And then up here it says make a variable. So we clicked on that. And we called our variable RPS, which is short for rock, paper, scissors. Okay, so click OK. And once you click OK, then 3 blocks appear in our variable section. Great. So the next thing we needed to do was we needed to set our variable to allow us the amount of options we need. So we needed 3 options because there's 3 options in our game, rock, paper, or scissors. But we wanted our program to pick these options at random because it wouldn't be very much fun if we knew what it was going to pick. Okay, and Amanda went through how to create a dice. And we remembered when Amanda was going through how to create a dice, she used a pick random block also, which came from the maths section. Okay, scroll down to pick random. And we'll drag this block out and embed it in here where the 0 is at the minute. Okay, so it's after highlighting in yellow. Okay, so now we've set our game. However, we haven't set it to the correct options because it says pick random between 0 and 10. And we wanted to pick randomly between 1, 2, and 3 because we've only 3 options. We need to change those numbers. Okay, so now if we shake our microbit, it will pick randomly between 1, 2, and 3. However, it doesn't know what to display once it picks randomly. So if it picks a 1, it doesn't know what to tell us when it picks a 1. And obviously, it needs to display something different if it picks a 1, 2, or a 3, because these are different conditions. So we need to set our conditions. Okay, and in order to set our conditions, we went over to the logic block and we used an if, then, else statement. Okay, so I'm going to pull out my if, then, else statement and I'm going to pop it in underneath where we set our variable. Okay, and now we need to set our conditions. So basically we need to tell our microbit if our game is equal to 1, show us rock because rock is our first option. Okay, and in order to do that, we need to replace this diamond-shaped block with an equals block, which we also found in the logic section. So down here under comparisons, there's a 0 is equal to 0 block. That's called our equals block. Okay, so I'm going to bring it up here and embed it into our if, then, else statement. Okay, so now I need to get my equals block to say if the game is equal to 1. So when we created our variable, we created it in variable, and shorthand for our game was RPS. So I'm going to see if this block will fit in here, which it should do. Great. So now if my game is equal to 1, we want our game to show us what the first option is, which is rock. Okay, and we created our rock using the show LEDs last week, so I'm going to do a very quick version of the rock again. However, in some of your home challenges, you created some very inventive rocks, so well done. Excellent. Okay, so now we have if our game is equal to 1, show rock. So then we needed to extend it on because we needed to add in the second and the third option, which are paper and scissors. So in order to do that, we needed to extend out our block using this plus symbol. And then that gives us our diamond shape. So it means that we can bring in our equals block for our second option. So we go back over to our logic, grab our equals block, and we embed it in here. And now what we're trying to say for this one is else if our game, which we found in variables, is equal to 2, then show us our second option, which was paper, and we created it using the show LEDs also. So we need to make sure we embed it in the right place. Okay, and I'm just going to do a quick outline of a sheet of paper, or what I feel looks like a sheet of paper. However, some people come up with very different ideas, and that's okay because we all have different ideas. So I'm going to do an empty sheet of paper. Okay, so I might leave it like that just for now because I want to do it quite quickly because Kaylin's going to cover something really important today. Okay, so now I have my game. If it rolls a 1, it's going to display my rock. Else if my game is equal to 2, it's going to show my sheet of paper. And now I need to give it its last option. Okay, and just noting here, we don't extend out our block, so we don't need the diamond shape for our last option. And the reason why we don't need the diamond shape for our last option is because we have only 3 options in our game. So our game can either pick a 1, a 2, or a 3. And we've explained to our program, if it picks a 1, show us this, and else if it picks a 2, show us this. So the only other option, it can't pick anything else except for 3. So our game will know then that if it doesn't pick a 1, and if it doesn't pick a 2, it has to pick a 3 because it's its only other option. Okay, and I remembered that in the show icons, there's a pair of scissors down the very bottom. So I'm going to scroll down to our scissors and I'm going to click on scissors. Okay, so now when we shake our microbit, we've set our game to pick randomly between 1 and 3. Okay, and if our game picks a 1, it'll show us our rock because our rock is our first option. Else if our game is equal to 2, it will show us our paper because our paper is our second option. And else it will show us a scissors because that's our only other option, which is our third option. Okay, so in order to create our rock, paper, scissors game last week, we needed to create a variable. So we covered variables and we needed to set conditions. So we also covered conditions, and they're really, really complicated coding concepts. So well done you. Okay, so I'm going to give my game one go and then I'm going to pass you on to Kayla and she's going to get started on what we're going to cover this week in today's webinar. Okay, so like last week, I'm going to hover over the shake. I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to count backwards from 3 and then I'm going to pick which option I want and see if I can beat my virtual rock, paper, scissors game. So 3, 2, 1. Oh, we both picked scissors, so I think that's a draw. And I'm going to leave it at that because I'm going to leave us at a draw. I'm going to have to play my virtual microbit afterwards. So I'm going to pass over to Kaylin and she's going to get started on today's lesson.
Thanks, Niamh. I actually lost there. So I played a game there myself and I lost because I had paper. So it wasn't as fun for me. But I hope you enjoyed doing rock, paper, scissors last week. It was great, great fun. And like Niamh said, we're going to be doing something a bit different today. We're introducing another new concept. And this one is one of my favorite things in microbit because I just think it is so cool. But remember that if you need to pause the webinar at any time, just like Niamh said earlier on, do put it on pause to catch up if needs be, because we're introducing a whole new section today. So do take your own time with it. Okay, so we're going to be talking about radio today. So some of you might have seen that section over at the side of your screen, the nice pink one that said radio that you can see now. And you might have wondered what that is. So let's just think about what the word radio means. So when I think of radio, I think of the radio in my car that I can turn on and play music to when I'm driving, or when in the morning I can hear my parents listening to the news on the radio. So that's what I think of when I hear radio. And when you actually think about that, what's happening? So where's that music coming from? Well, it's coming from someone who is broadcasting it. So usually the presenter or the producers on the show, they're broadcasting this music or the news. Okay, so they're broadcasting it without any wires or anything. So let's think about that. Is there anything that you might know of or you might have used before that's able to send things without having it connected? So when I think of that, I'm able to think of Bluetooth, because when I was younger, I used to send pictures to my friends via Bluetooth on my phone, or I used to be able to send music. So let's think back to our first week of doing microbit, and we would have seen this picture. And these are all of the cool sensors and the different things that our lovely little microbit has. So if we look over here on the right-hand side, we can actually see one section that says radio and Bluetooth. Okay, and if I actually look on my actual microbit here, you're able to see the little symbol there, and that looks like a skyline almost, for radio and Bluetooth. So my microbit actually uses Bluetooth to send different things, just like if you were sending something like a radio. So it uses Bluetooth to broadcast something. And then also in another microbit, it can receive that and show it out, just like if you were broadcasting music and someone is listening to it. Okay, so let's jump into the code. Let's jump into the code before we talk about it anymore. Okay, so I already have my microbit open here. I'm just going to click into new project, just like Niamh already showed you. And I'm going to click into that radio section once it loads up for me. Okay, so I'm going to click into radio. Now, let's have a look at the different options that we have. Set group, send number, send string, send value. Okay, there's a lot of blocks here. So let's think about if you were turning on the radio yourself, or if you were with your parents when they're turning on the radio. Okay, if they wanted to listen to Radio na Gaeltachta or RTE, they wanted to listen to that radio channel, they have to tune in to that channel. Or if you were sending something to someone using Bluetooth, you need to make sure that your phone is connected to their phone. So you need to have some way of being connected or in the same group so that you're all connected in that way. So if I look there, I can actually see that there is a block that sets our radio group to 1. So that means whoever else that is near you goes into that group, they'll be able to listen and receive everything that's broadcasted to that group. Okay? So I'm going to bring it out. Okay. Now, I need to think about this as well. So where do I want this block to go? I'm going to think, so I've on start and forever. I'm going to put it in one of these. Do I want my radio group to only set to that at the beginning, or do I want it to always be set to that radio group? Do I want my microbit to always be set to that group? And I'm going to say yes. So we're going to try it out in the forever block because we always want to be connected to that group. Now I can click on that one and I can use my own code if you want to, or the own name of my group. And I'm going to choose one that I know my friends would know if they were nearby, and I'm going to call it 123. And that's my radio group. And you can see down here that it says the ID is 123. Okay, so that we know that that is the name of our group. That is the group that we are all connecting to. Okay, so now I have my radio group set, and we don't need the on start block. So I'm going to throw it into the bin over there. Okay, so now we're all connected to the same channel. Okay, thinking back to an actual radio station. People have tuned in. What's the next thing that needs to happen? Someone actually needs to send something, don't they? They need to actually play that music or start telling the news. So let's go into that radio section and see if there's anything here if we wanted to try and send a message. Okay. Now, if I want to try and send a message, I want to send words. And that's something that we've learned about in microbit, that words aren't called words, they're called something else. So Niamh, can you remind us, what are they called?
Yes, indeed. We use strings in coding, and they cover words.
Brilliant. Okay. So we're going to be looking for send a string. So radio set group, we already have that. Send a number, we don't want to send a number. Send a value, not yet. Radio send string, that's that buzzword that you just said. So I bring that out, but I don't have anywhere to put it. I haven't told my microbit when to send a string. And that's when we go back to one of the most important things in coding is our input. So when is that going to happen? So we're going to go into input, and I'm just going to do it on button A. Okay? Right. So now I'm going to type in my string that I want to send. I'm going to say, Happy Monday. Okay, so I want to wish everyone a happy Monday. Okay, looks good. I'm in the group that I want to be in, and I'm sending the string. Let's press button A and see what happens. Okay, so I saw my little radio symbol lit up there, so it's being sent. And then this microbit at the bottom, this is the microbit that is receiving, that should be receiving, but nothing happened. Let's just try that again. Okay, so it's being sent, but it's not receiving anything. Okay, so let's go back in our heads to when we first learned about coding. And one of the first things we learned is that you have to be really specific, because microbit only knows what we tell them. They don't know anything else. So if we look at our code there, we have told microbit to join a group, and then we've told them to send a message. But have we told microbit to actually look out for anything or listen to anything? No, we haven't. So let's go into radio and see if there's anything in here that will tell our microbit to be listening out for any messages that are being broadcasted, or to be looking for anything that's being broadcasted in that group. So I go down, on radio receive number. We're not talking about numbers, so we're not talking about values. On radio received string. Okay, that sounds a little bit weird, but out of all of these blocks, it looks like the one that's going to work. So I'm going to bring that out and have a look at this block. So if I look at it a little bit closer, I can see that this part here, the received string part, is actually a different color to the pink block. So now if we think back to that first time coding again, and we try and think, okay, if we have a block and we don't know where it came from, we can just look for the color, and then that'll tell us where it came from. So I want you to pause the webinar now. I want you to try and figure out which section over here on the left could that block have come from, and also just get caught up on your code and have your own message to be sent on the string as well. Okay, so now I'm going to look at it and I can see that it's red, okay, and it's a very vibrant red. Let's look over here. Okay, it's not music because music is more like an orangey red. I go down, I can see variables. Okay, so it's the same thing as the variables. So we did variables last week. And when we were learning about variables, we learned that they were something that can change. So they don't stay the same the whole time. They change throughout the code. They vary. So on radio received string. So our variable is called received string. So I think what that means is when the radio receives some sort of a message, but it's changing. So we don't know what that is because it's always changing because it's a variable. Okay, so that actually does sound like it will work now that we've looked at it a bit more. Okay, so let's test out our code again and see if it works now. Okay, I'm pressing send. My messages I'm being told that they're being broadcasted, but I don't see anything on my second microbit. Neve, do you know what could be the problem here, do you think?
Well, I think we've a bug in our code because our very last block that we added in the on radio received string, it doesn't have anything embedded in it. So it doesn't know what we want to show. Although we're telling it what to show, it doesn't know what to display because there's nothing embedded in the middle of it. It's empty.
Okay, really good point there. So we've told microbit to listen out and receive the message. And when it receives it, blank. We haven't told them what to do next. So we need to tell them what to do if they receive any message. Doesn't matter what the message says because it's a variable. So what do we want it to do? We want it to show a string. We want it to show the words. So if I think back to my coding, I know that we've seen a block like that before where we're showing a string. And I think it was one of the easier ones. So I'm going to look in basic. And there we go. Okay, so it's one of the basic blocks that does show string. So I can bring that out. And okay, so now I'm telling my microbit to, when it receives a string, to show the string. Okay, let's test it out now and see what happens. Okay, it's saying hello. It's not saying happy Monday, it's saying hello. So why don't we try and see, okay, what do we want? We want...
Well, Kaylin, we wanted to play the received string. We don't want it to play the string that's typed into it. So if we had a look at maybe moving the received string down and embedding it into the show string block, it might play the string that we're trying to send or the string that it receives. Would that work?
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and you're really using your variables that we learned last week, that our variables can slot into different blocks. So why don't we do just that? We try and bring down our received string. So now what we're telling our code is when you receive a string, we want you to show the string that you've received. Okay, that code looks good. Let's test it out and see if it actually sends. And it's saying happy Monday. Okay, brilliant. We've gotten it working now. So I'm going to pretend now that I have this blue microbit and Neve, you have the red one, okay?
Okay.
Okay, so I have the blue one and I'm going to be in one room and let's imagine that Neve is in the room next to me, okay? And I press A on I download this to my microbit and I press A. Okay, I'm not seeing anything on my microbit. So what could we do? Niamh, what do you think we could do to actually show our microbit, let the microbit know, let us know that microbit has sent the message? What do you think we could do there?
Well, we could show a string on button A pressed, so that it'll show us a string to let us know that the string we wanted to send has been sent.
Okay, cool. So then we're almost letting we're almost sending a little message to ourselves there to say, okay, message is sent. The message has sent. Okay, so
like a delivery report, kind of.
Exactly. So let's go into basic and have a look. And I'm actually going to show myself a little icon instead of a string, because I think it'll be nice and quick. It'll just show the icon whenever it sends a message. And that way I don't have to change my string every single time I want to save a message. So I'm just going to do a little show LED and just do a little dot. Okay. Right. So now let's test out our code and see if it works. So microbit's getting ready. So I'm sending microbit in one room. I'm going to send the message. Okay, so I've sent, there's a dot up, which means I've sent it. And now Niamh is receiving the message saying, happy Monday. Okay, so I'm quite happy with that code. I think received string, we're good with those ones. But we saw some other cool blocks in that radio section earlier as well. So let's go back into radio and see what other blocks we have here. So the next one after set group is send radio number. Okay, so that could be interesting. So let's bring that one out. Okay, and I have a problem again. I don't have my input, so I need to go and get my input, bring it in, and change it to button B. So button A is going to be my strings, button B is going to be my numbers. Okay, so now I have my number and I'm sending my number. The next step is we need to tell microbit to listen out, because I don't think this one is going to work down here because it's very specific and it says the string is received, whereas we want to listen out for numbers. So I'm going to go to radio and do on radio received number. Okay, now we want to go and get that show number block, which is in basic. Show the number, and then we're going to use the little tip that Niamh just told us there. We're going to drag down this variable into the show number section. Okay, and I'm going to send the number 4. Okay, I'm just going to send the number 4, and then I'm going to bring in a different signal this time to show me that I've sent my string or my number, and I'm just doing a little X. Okay, so that looks like it should work. So let's test it out. So I'm going to click on B, and we have the X on one and the 4 on the other. Okay, so we have our code there for the radio, which is brilliant. I think all that code is really, really cool, and we're sending numbers and strings. But let's think about, is there anything else that we could be using instead of just sending a number or sending words? But the words are cool because we're able to say nice phrases or compliments like happy Monday, but the numbers they're just a number. So let's think back to that picture that we showed at the beginning of the webinar of all the other sensors and the different things that microbit has in it. And I can remember one that was the thermometer. So it actually can measure the heat, Okay, so where would I find a block that would tell us about the thermometer or the sensors? So let's think about them for a second. Where are the sensors getting their information? Are they getting it from inside of the microbit, from the code? No, they're getting them from outside of the microbit, from the environment and from the things around it. Just like if you have your microbit and you're pressing a button, it's taking in things from outside. So, Niamh, where do we usually find blocks that are taking in things from the environment?
Well, our input section usually takes information in from the environment, so it gives the microbit information, so it allows it to take it from the environment. So generally in the input section, that's where we find blocks like that.
Okay, perfect. So let's have a look in this input section. Okay, button A, shake, we've done them before. And, oh, okay, so here's my temperature block. And it looks like it's that nice rounded shape as well that it might fit into another block. So I'm going to bring that out. Okay, so let's think about what temperature is. So when people are saying what temperature it is, they could say it's hot or it's cold. But if they're being really specific about the temperature, like let's say you're watching the weather forecast, they're being really specific. What do they usually say, Niamh?
Well, generally when they're describing the weather, they describe the weather using numbers. So it's either going to be a -°C or a ++°C. So that's how we can kind of figure out if it's going to be warm or cold outside and what kind of clothes we should wear.
Okay, really, really good. And at the moment, we've been so lucky because it has been lovely and warm. So we've had high temperatures, which we've been hearing every night on the weather. So just like you said, it's a number. It's not a string. So let's bring it down and see if it fits. And it does. So it does click in there and shows us the radio send number that is the temperature. Okay, now an important thing to note about the temperature is the thermometer that measures the temperature is inside of our actual microbit. So if you are using the simulator, if you are just using what's on your computer or on your tablet, it is always going to say 21 degrees because that is just the general one that it always says. But if you wanted to get the more specific reading of what the temperature is, you'd have to have the normal microbit. But we're still able to pretend, and that's okay. We can still pretend that it's 21 degrees if we really wish hard enough. Okay, so send number temperature. So I want my microbit to send the number that is the temperature to my other microbit. Okay, so let's test out that code. I'm going to press B. And it worked. Perfect. So how could we use that in real life? Would you be able to, if you had one microbit, let's say, sitting inside the fridge and you wanted to get its temperature, you could put your microbit inside the fridge, press the button, and then on your other microbit, it'll tell you what the temperature is. Or if you wanted to put it beside the kettle, and you can click it and test what the temperature is on the kettle, or outside, or in one room and then another room. So you are actually able to use microbit in real life, and those sensors are so important to being able to use microbit to actually help you in the real world, not just to teach you about coding. So I'm going to pass you on to Niamh now, who's going to tell you about our really cool home challenge and quickly go over what we learned about today in radio.
Thank you, Kaylin. Okie doke. Okay, so we got a good bit covered again today. So we're moving swiftly on every single week. So remember, if you do want to go back and watch any of the webinars, do feel free to. They're on our YouTube playlist, so DreamSpace HomeSpace. Okay, so what did we learn today? Well, the first thing we learned about was inputs, and we've come across inputs before this webinar, okay? And inputs are the way in which the microbit can take in information from its environment, okay? The next thing we covered today was we covered radio, and radio allows us to send and receive data using Bluetooth, okay? Now, the next thing we covered was strings with radio, so sending and receiving string using radio. And the final thing we covered today was numbers with radio, so sending and receiving numbers using radio. And one of the cool things that Kaylin showed us was that we could send the temperature via radio. So that was pretty cool. Okay, so our home challenge today Okay, this is a little bit more broad than our usual home challenges. So we want you to try and think of how you could use the microbit in a real life context using radio. Okay, so how could we use it in a real life context in a way that it might help people? Okay, because we'll be moving on to that next week and we want to see what cool ideas you might come up with. And then we also want you to practice how to send and receive both strings and numbers using your microbit and the radio section. Okay. Now we're going to move on to question and answers. So I'm looking in the Q&A section here and we have a couple of questions that I'm going to direct at Kaylin. Okay, the first question, Kaylin, can we send more than one thing using radio? So for example, can we send a string and a piece of music using radio?
Okay, so that's a really interesting question. So you can send numbers or you can send strings, and you can send as many of those as you want. So if you wanted to send Happy Monday, lots of love from Mom, or lots of love from Kaylin, then you could send all of those as separate strings, but you can't actually send music. But next week, we'll be introducing you to a cool way where you can do something like that.
Okay, interesting. Thanks, Kaylin. And another question here. Can we send radio messages to someone on a different device without using a physical microbit?
Okay, so yes, that is a really good question. You actually can't. You have to have the real microbit to be able to send them to other microbits. But at the moment, you can just use the simulator to see what it looks like on the top microbit and the microbit at the bottom. But at the moment, if you only can send them to each other if you have two separate microbits.
Oh, okay, thanks, Kaylin. So if you do have two real microbits or physical microbits and you download your code, you'll be able to send the radio messages backwards and forwards to each other. But that's only if you have the physical microbits.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. So thank you all for joining us today for our 4th MakeCode for Microbit webinar. We look forward to seeing you next week. And we also have all the information about our previous home challenges as well as our on-demand webinars on the link on screen now. So if you've missed out on any of our webinars, or if you want to go back and recreate some of the home challenges, please feel free to go to the link on screen now. But from me and Kaylin, that's all for now for this week, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye.
Bye, guys.